So, I was stupid and went to an acquaintance's friend's apartment that is technically a neighbor. I walked in and immediately noticed all the smoke in the air and a little boy sitting on the couch in the midst of it. The friend of mine, I'll call L, and the dad R started smoking illegal substances, and I was immediately uncomfortable. This was all in front of the child. R hit the kid a couple of times and I said, please don't do that. And he laughed at me. I spent some time with the boy. He was so excited to show me his toys and stuff. I had to get out of there and the boy grabbed my hand and begged me not to leave. I told him that I would be back. I feel so bad for lying. I got home and told a couple people and they told me to stay out of it, but I just can't. I reported it to a hotline and I'm afraid of the repercussions because it's obvious that it was me who told. I'm so sick about it that I can't sleep. I could just be paranoid as I've listened to my fair share of crime podcasts, but the more I think of it, the more odd it gets. I consider most of 1996 to be a rebuilding year in my life. I was 25, fresh out of a relationship that had crashed and burned right before the wedding. So deep was the crater in widespread fallout that I had to move to a different state to avoid my to-be father-in-law's friends and law enforcement, who were making sure that I spent time roadside with them at least 4 times in the first 2 months after it all ended. I started over in a new place with a lack of resources and connections that were going to make it hard to get back into shape before I turned 30. Still, I was free and beholden to no one but my creditors, so I had that going for me. I lived in my means and rented a townhouse and a long row of properties in a less than reputable part of town. I didn't have time to do a walkthrough before I moved in. In fact, I rented the place unseen based on the online advertisement. It was close to the job, which was great because someone had trashed my car the week before I moved out, and I ended up driving a beat-up Dodge pickup that I bought with the last of my savings. Once settled, I was locked into the rental for 12 months, which oddly enough gave me a sense of permanence in my new surroundings and helped me get to work on my new life and career in human capital management and training services. My unit was at the end of the block of 12 with 2 bedrooms up top with a master bath and a half bath in the living area. It was not a massive space, but it felt empty for lack of any furniture. I slept on an inflatable mattress for the first 3 months and used folding chairs and a card table to eat and watch television. The block was a place where people were either on their way up or back down, young kids in their first home, recently divorced with kids, the downturned from society in one way or another. There were fights, domestic and otherwise, throughout the night. Drunken parties and birthday galas took over the block on weekends, but nobody ever interacted with other families for some reason. No one knew anyone else's name or business. At least that's what the cops told me the first time they stopped by to ask me if I heard or witnessed something going on in the block. My immediate neighbors were just weird, like a space monkey on your lawn inviting you to a probe kind of weird. It was a circus of 3. The short, wild-haired woman looked like an off-brand troll doll, with big pink hair that defied logic, and a malfunctioning soundboard that only shrieked when provoked. The tall, thin man looked like an average bald human might appear in an elongating funhouse mirror. I don't know how old they were, but they resembled old, well-worn furniture, like the contents of an elderly couple's storage locker, old and ready to be discarded. The troll doll lady and funhouse man were not fond of talking to neighbors or anyone. They were troubled people. Their fights would bleed through the shared walls and get louder when talking outside. They knocked my only hanging art from the wall when one threw the other against the other side. Funhouse man liked to take his morning coffee in the sunshine, standing behind the screen of his front door in tidy whities and an oversized flannel shirt. He was often the first person I would encounter in the morning on my way to work, and he would stare off across the playground into the woods, as if in a trance long before I left the townhouse, and probably long after my truck took me away. The cops knew them by their real names. There had been a child living there, but he or she had been removed from the home. A frequent guest in their little David Lynch sitcom world was a guy named Chuck, so named because a troll doll lady would yell his name every 10 minutes anytime he was in the house. Chuck was a long-haul trucker who parked his sleeper rig across the street every couple of weeks. For some reason, he didn't shower inside, so Saturday mornings he would often run the garden hose over the fenced-in area in the back to take a cold shower, which was a lovely sight the first time I didn't know what was going on. He sometimes walked out back to take a long beer piss in the runoff drain. His aversion to indoor plumbing was never explained to me, but I am forever grateful I never walked out back to catch him popping a squat in the tree line. For about 6 months, I tolerated the noise, let the neighbors be the bad guys, and called the police when the fights went too loud for too long, or when they all got drunk and played their 80s punk records through the night, and engaged in the song of the people howling at the moon. I got to a place where I was making enough money to buy real furniture, or rent out a better place. I still had a lease to honor, so I bought a sofa, a real bed, and a desk set for an office. It was still a minimalist affair, but comfortable. The townhouse felt like my home for once, and suddenly, the intrusions from my neighbors were twice as annoying. One night, a troll doll lady got into a fight with the pizza delivery driver, who knocked on her door by mistake but wouldn't give her the pizza. I only know this because the pizza and its box hit my front window at different spots. The shrieking, pink-haired witch attacked the driver, which led to a light show by police that rivaled a Mannheim Steamroller Christmas show. I was left to clean the pizza off the window and call the office to replace the window. They refused until the neighbors agreed to pay, so I enjoyed a cracked window for a month before the court accepted her guilty plea over the property damage. Her arrest was around the same time residents on our block, and the next one over, began reporting burglaries, and I was asked by police if I had any information or experienced anything odd. Other than the 3 Geek Circus next door, I told them I did not. Fortunately, my work and social life were on the rebound. I met a girl and we hit it off, though we stayed far from my house during the early part of our relationship, so I began spending more time away from home. Though I would often come home late at night, as the neighbors were in a loud state of either bliss or rage. During the day, maintenance worked to replace the insulation and update the HVAC system along the attic spaces along the entire block. I didn't think much about it because the work was done while I was gone in the daytime, and I assumed the property managers would be coming into my place at some point to access my attic. Probably the last one, as they started on the far end for mine. Quickly, I lost track of the project. One night, I came home and something felt a little off. The front door was locked, the windows intact, and the back door secured. However, it felt and even smelled a little off. Sometimes, I could smell the tobacco and weed upstairs when it filtered up and over the attic space, but I was sure someone had been there. I cleared the house in a short, quiet march, as my dad, a Marine, had taught me, but found no one and nothing missing. My computer, 2 TVs, everything were intact. Except, I went to grab a beer from the fridge to calm my nerves and found a 6-pack missing. I was sure I had 2 scratchback stout packs from my last visit to Stewie's microbrew. The loaf of bread seemed to be a little shorter than the morning before, by several slices. I couldn't be sure, but I thought I might be missing some other items as well, but wasn't sure if that was just the growing anxiety over being robbed. I wondered if maintenance had been by to inspect the window, or work in the attic and help themselves to a snack and drink, It would explain the musty smell in my apartment, and given the people I knew who owned and managed the property, it wouldn't surprise me if a couple of their day laborers took a load off for a bit. And this smell was most present upstairs, but in my office, which was opposite the neighbor's wall, so it wasn't lingering too bad. It was clearly Jim Funk. I immediately assumed laborer because it made the most sense, so I didn't report it to the police that night. The next morning, however, I discovered my medications missing from my cabinet. All of them. My Lexapro, my emergency anxiety meds, and my other bottles were gone. I checked the windows and doors again, now in a near panic. I called off work for the first time using a burglary as my excuse. I was the 7th house in 2 townhouse blocks to be hit in the past 2 weeks, the 5th in my block, and one of the 5 without signs of forced entry. The police wouldn't tell me much about the other incidents and didn't seem to believe that I locked my doors until I reminded them who I lived next to. By that point, I really didn't want to live in that place anymore. It no longer felt like home. I was sharing it with something I felt lingered in the air around me. There was a feeling of dread, a sense of violation knowing there was someone out there who was inside your life without permission. Once removed, it feels like living in a house without walls. And there was a serial burglar in the neighborhood, where the cops traditionally left to work out its own problems and carry away the remains. A week after the break-in, a few things happened to mess up my world even further. First, a troll doll lady returned home and, because she was on house arrest, a welcome party brought out all the freaks Friday night. Second, because I was an idiot, I had to come home and pick up a few things I needed to spend the weekend with my new girlfriend. As she was already in the truck and we were on the highway out of town, there was no other choice but to bring her home with me. The lot, including my spaces, was filled with what looked like gridlock in a demolition derby, so I had to park a good distance away. Third, she insisted on seeing the inside of my townhouse and going to the bathroom before hitting the road, so I had to introduce her to the freak show next door before ever setting foot inside. Fourth, on the way up to the walk to the front door, we encountered a funhouse man in the open doorway, gatekeeper to the drunk, dumb place inside. He was wearing his morning apparel, briefs and a long shirt except with a can of Red Dog instead of coffee in his hand. Fifth, funhouse man looked at us coming up the walk and spoke to me for the first time in 7 months. "You tap that?" I think he said, his wet mouth spitting the words in his dead eyes, scoping my girl. I shifted to put myself between them and the walk as we closed in on the door, and I fished my keys out of my pants. Funhouse man panicked, letting out a squeal before diving inside and slamming the door. The party went silent instantly. Sixth, my girl was unnerved by this and lost all of her thrill over being with me in that place. She walked inside my home and registered her immediate disapproval. She didn't even want to go to the bathroom there. I remember making some excuses, saying that it's a temporary thing, and the first step to better living, etc. But it was the beginning of the end for us, like she had caught me cheating with a troll doll lady. Seventh, I didn't realize the party had spilled out into the front lawn, and in front of my townhouse until I opened the door to see Chuck, the trucker, standing under my porch lamp looking drunk, stupid, and angry. He was joined by a few strangers who looked equal parts the same condition, and also like I had just fired the lot of them from the sideshow. I stopped inside the screen door trying to think of anything to say, clever or otherwise. Chuck, the trucker, started the conversation. "You go with Kenny?" "What?" "Hey, crap for brains, I asked you if you went at Kenny in his own home." Nothing like that happened, but I knew immediately that my reality was not shared by those gathered in front of my own home. "No." He said something, I got closer to hear. He squealed like a little girl and ran inside. End of story. I was okay at the end of the first two sentences, but my anger got the best of me by the start of the third, and it did little to calm the group, which had swollen to about a dozen people, looking for blood or things to break. Chaka was not convinced by my answer, and took a step forward to open my screen door. He put a hand on the knob and stopped. "You step out here, or I come in there. Go take a crap in a tree. You're not coming in here, and I'm not bleeding over that weirdo friend of yours. You can go beat each other like you normally. 8th. The word stopped there because Chuck had punched a hole in the screen to get to my face. I fell back and accidentally tackled my now firmly ex-girlfriend. Fortunately, I didn't have much in the way of furniture to break on the way down. The only thing going for me at that moment was the miraculous arrival of police, drawn by the parking fiasco and the noise. My face was broken. My newest ex had a bloody nose and a sprained shoulder, and I was out a good $400 in deposits for a weekend that would never happened. In short order, a few important things happened. Chuck went to jail, and the charges against him would become the least of his problems. The party turned into story time, where partygoers spun their best yarn about how I insulted, attacked, and got after Kenny, the funhouse man. I was questioned about the encounter by the police and spent time with an EMT who I totally failed to impress enough to get her number. I was let go as several of the partygoers were arrested for either public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, or outstanding warrants. I'm sure this warmed me to the neighbors and their friends. My weekend companion was rescued from it all by a friend who drove her out of my life forever. You would think 8 things in short order would be enough. I had to continue living next to these people for at least 4 more months, and I was going to spend those months terrified by what they might do to my property while I was working or the burglars coming back. However, 9th, I woke up the next morning to the neighbors cleaning up from the party. Glass and aluminum, plastic and cardboard packed 2 full-size bins. Credit where it's due. The idiots recycled. From the what-the-heck position of my bedroom window, I noticed 2 of the bottles stood out from the Keystone Red Dog and Milwaukee labels. They were the scratchback labels for my 6-pack. Now, there is a chance that they were brought to the party by a guest with better taste in beer than friends, but that was too much of a coincidence. My brain presented a question that I could not answer. Where is the attic access in this townhouse? I just assumed there was one somewhere, but never actually looked or came across it. So how did maintenance get into it? While totally unrelated to the beer bottle on a conscious level, my paranoia and cynical nature collaborated on a series of connections. As I looked around the house for a drop that I had missed for months, my brain worked in its weird way to line up facts in such a way that would sound insane if I wrote it all out. I went upstairs. My office was where the funk smell had been most pungent. I looked around again and decided to check the closet. I didn't check it before because there was nothing in it. On the carpet, I noticed a light dusting of drywall and paint flecks. I assumed it was rubbing from the sliding door against the wall, but it concentrated at the side by the wall and not equally along the track. The closet only had hanging shelves on the interior side. Looking up, I expected to see an attic access port, but found a jagged square carved into the drywall ceiling. Maintenance was not exactly flip this shack quality, but I didn't think even they would use a box cutter to carve a hole in my ceiling, and none of them were skinny enough to fit through that. The funhouse man was skinny enough to potentially weasel up and down. The scuff mark on the inside wall of the closet was pretty telling. It took a while for the police to make their way over in response to my non-emergency call, but it quickly gathered their interest when the first responding officer reported what everyone missed the first time they had searched the home. 3 unmarked cars arrived after the initial squad car. My neighbors were uncharacteristically quiet once the first cruiser rolled up around noon. I offered a folding ladder and the police looked up into the blistering hot attic. A hole had been cut through the insulation, and a spot in the corner wide enough for a small or slender person to fit through. I was questioned again downstairs for about an hour, before I heard more voices upstairs than I remember going up there. Before I could ask, a familiar face appeared at my door. My landlord, Ahmed, looked concerned and astonished, which was a new expression, and the third after his. "Can I take your money?" and his general resting, screw-off face. "What has happened?" he asked. "What is going on? Are you all right?" He walked into my home without invitation and sat with me on my sofa. I asked him if he was there to fix my cracked window. Everything else happened without my direct involvement. I remained a guest in my own home for most of the day as police took photos and marched up and down my stairs. I learned that my assumption about the attic work was wrong, that workers had to access specific units to get around the firewalls between them. In fact, there were holes on the firewall that allowed workers to enter the roof in one unit and run the entire length of the building. It was a measure that saved time and footsteps, but was a violation of several laws and codes, meaning that Ahmed's life was about to become much more complicated and expensive. These gaps in the firewalls also allowed someone to drill a hole in their own ceiling and run the length of 11 other homes, walking on the same boards laid by the property owners that muffled their presence. Every single unit in that block had a hole similar to the one in my ceiling. Furthermore, at one time, the building had been wired for cable through the roof, and holes that had been cut to fish the cable into the upstairs bedrooms had been plugged up years earlier during an upgrade. Some of those patches had been replaced with removable plugs, giving someone a clear view into various bedrooms. In the attic, police found a step stool with a rope tied to the top step. It was stashed in the corner of the roof over my next-door neighbor's unit. But that's not the weirdest thing. Though all evidence pointed to the main access point being the smaller bedroom in my neighbor's unit, police did not arrest Funhouse Man or Troll Doll Lady for the crime. Around 3 in the afternoon, police had recovered items stolen from other units along with various controlled substances. Troll Doll Lady was arrested for violating the terms of her bond, and Funhouse Man was taken in for the drugs. I was shocked to see a third person, not Chuck, walked out of the townhouses in cuffs. I had never met him before. He was rail thin, thinner than Funhouse Man by half. An old man's face and a young man's body, with scars and bruises all over skin that I've only ever seen on corpses, white and waxy. He was unclothed except for soiled basketball shorts. He literally recoiled as if allergic to outside air and sun, and had to be dragged shoeless to the cruiser. I don't know who that kid was, but I got the feeling he never left the townhouse ever. Maybe not even the attic. The thought that this skeletal creep was looking in on me and had access to my life makes me overly cautious these days. I have eyes everywhere in my home, and I take pains to inspect the smallest spaces in and around my property. I often wake in the night seeing that face peering at me through a window or from the dark. It's been a long time, and everyone I mentioned in this story by name is dead. I don't know about the kid though. I never got a name and I was unable to find him in any police record. Maybe he doesn't really exist. Maybe he didn't show up on any records and is languishing in prison as John Doe. Or maybe he's out there lurking in some upper level of an apartment building, or hiding inside the basement or walls. I've rarely ever felt truly home since.